What's up, guys? What of course you'll be seeing today is a breakdown and review of the exotic scout rifle in Destiny called Boolean Gemini. This weapon is a quest-specific reward from beating the very long Taken King quest line. You have to beat each quest line from each of the Vanguard dealers, then you have to go to the Reef and beat Petras and Varix, and once you're done, you need to be Queen's Wrath rank 3 to be rewarded, so make sure that's the case or you're going to be starting to have to do Petra bounties. Statistically, the gun starts with a base damage of 290. You can infuse it higher. The fire rate is 37%, has an impact rating of 48, a range of 61, a stability rating of 53, a reload percentage of 68, and a magazine size of 19. So when we're looking at the preliminary look, completely disregarding all perks, which I'll get to, the stats show an extreme balance in the same damage archetype of the old fan favorite Vision of Confluence. It has a higher range and higher base reload than Vision actually does. So if you like that scout rifle, it's basically the same despite the base stability is a bit lower, but the perks will address that. In terms of PvP damage output, it hits for 41 on body shots and 61 on headshots. With regard to the skill tree, all Boolean Geminis are the same because they're exotics. They all deal kinetic damage. You have three clear options in terms of ballistics. Accurized ballistics, which increases range and impact. Smooth ballistics, which increases range by about 8 points, but also slightly increases recoil, and actually smooth ballistics is my choice. And lastly, aggressive ballistics, which gives more predictable, gives more recoil, but it's also more predictable. But it cuts into range slightly, cuts into stability slightly, and also slightly enhances impact per shot. So there's a lot going on there, and that's one I wouldn't choose because of the cut to stability and impact. It does hit in PvP slightly harder though, so if you're the type of guy that looks into each and every damage point as a potential point of emphasis, maybe that would be for you in PvP. When breaking down the skill tree, the first perk is called Unflinching, which makes the weapon easier to fire while under fire. That perk alone could be extremely helpful in firefights and PvP, because if you remember, Red Death has it as well. But it's an overall underwhelming exotic perk to me because it completely is unneeded in PvE. The next three perks which you'll have a choice over are Single Point Sling, which helps the weapon, it allows you to switch weapons faster. So if you get in a firefight and you run out of ammo, you have to switch to a sidearm or a sniper rifle or something like that. That will help you out. In addition to be able to move faster while you aim. The next one's Hammer Forge, which increases range and accuracy and is my choice. And lastly, Perfect Balance, which will dramatically increase stability by about 13 points if I read it correctly. You could make the case for any, but I'm going to choose Hammer Forged. The recoil is very manageable without Perfect Balance, so it's not necessarily needed, though you can't have any qualms about choosing Perfect Balance. And the last, and Single Point Sling will really help in the Crucible alone. The last two perks of note, which you'll have a choice over between the two of them, are One Way, which grants bonus agility to precision kills, and Or Another, which grants increased armor on non-precision kills. But since it's been embedded in me in every FPS I've ever played in my existence to aim for the guy's head, it feels really weird to start aiming for non-headshots, so I choose One Way, even though the armor would be more useful. With regard to my overall impressions in PvE, I find it to be a very competent weapon with, like I said, base stats better than that of Vision of Confluence, which should hold its own because Vision of Confluence was used for everything, even though it did have an element. It has perks that can make it quite successful. I do find it underwhelming though, because as much as it doesn't have an element, and because it uses an exotic slot. There are other just as good, if not better, non-exotic scout weapons, even though, like, you can list Doom of Chelchis as one, even though it is an inferior weapon to this. You can list, and Hung Jury, the Dead Orbit scout rifle, which buying it from, stock from the dealer is probably the best scout rifle in the game. It can hold its own just fine, but I find the perks for PvE underwhelming. In PvP, it's a medium to long range weapon, and it hits hard per shot. Unflinching is really nice to have in 1 versus 1 firefights, and it has a very high stability and range combo, which makes it lethal in long range firefights, especially paired with Unflinching. I find it to be a better PvP option than a PvE one, but until the December patch, which is going to neutralize pulse rifles a bit, pulse rifles are king for now over scout rifles. You find you will lose out to pulse rifles at medium range and even longer range with a high stability pulse rifle, making it not worth the exotic slot to use. I do find this weapon overall to be an underrated weapon that probably will become a monster in the December patch once pulse rifles take a bit of a hit. But for now, the fact that you're using an exotic slot for a weapon that has equals makes it not worth using as a full-time weapon. But personally, I don't find there's a lot underwhelming with the weapon, just maybe the perks in PvE. That's about it. See you later.